Hello. Mr. Jackpots. Dougie. Red door. Hello, friends. We've arrived at Gemini Decan II, which is the Nine of Swords. Nine of Swords. So yet again, I have a lot that I want to fit into this, and I'm resisting the urge to script things. So I hope I remember everything. Nine of Swords. This is another image that people tend to fret over when they see it in a deck spread, or in a reading, in the Rider-Waite. This is what we have. Doesn't look like the most scary card, but it doesn't look like a fun time, particularly. I want to go to, again, Talos 777 to Mel Maline's card for this image, for this card, which is more anchored in a lot of the language coming from the Picatrix and other more medieval sources. Couple things to notice here. Nine of Swords is titled Cruelty. The Lord of Cruelty. Gemini, Mars. We have a split image, as we would expect in Gemini. We have two figures. We have a bird-headed human with a bow and arrow. We have a lion-headed human with a sword or with a knife. The bow or the bird-headed human is potentially wearing a crown, it looks like, and is pointing outward, and the lion-headed human is injuring themselves. Cruelty. When I just try to take this image for itself, I have the thought of cruelty directed outward and cruelty directed inward. Is that all that the image wants to tell us, though? I think there's a lot more there. That bird in the Mel Maline image seems to be a vulture. I would guess that's a vulture. But when I was thinking through this, well, we'll go there in a minute, actually. Next, we'll go to the other images that are brought into this Decan. So, if we are in Gemini, we are still with the Lovers, which is an image about, another mirror image about polarity. I was suggesting before that perhaps this has more to do with a split than it does with a separation than it does with a unification, and I believe that Gemini 2 takes that idea and runs with it even further. Cruelty may be a title that is given when we, as one thing that we do, or our psyches do, or happens automatically when the split occurs. So, Gemini, the Lovers. The ruler of Gemini is still Mercury, which is the magician. I don't care to show that card again right now. The Magician, or the Magus. The Chaldean Ruler has changed in this Decan. The Chaldean Ruler is going to be Mars. Now, Mars is very interesting here. Mars in the tarot is often misattributed to different cards, but it is the card of the Tower. And I only brought Melmaline images of the Tower, though I really wish I would have grabbed the Marseille deck, because the Tower in the Marseille deck has the Tower being struck by lightning, and then has two jesters tumbling, one out the front door and one seemingly over the edge. They don't look particularly worried about it, though, but the Tower is being struck and people are being ejected. Melmaline's images are really, really interesting here. So we have the Tower. This is from Tabula Mundi. The bird of prey is what seems to be falling and tumbling from the lightning here. And the Tower is this boar-like creature. She talks a lot about why she chose the boar, but we can suffice to say that we know that this Hebrew letter can roughly translate to the mouth. So the Tower roughly translates to the mouth. Interesting? What do we think about when we think of Mars as the mouth? The Tower struck, or the mouth of the Tower, with flames coming out of it. This is her Nine of Swords, which she does a great job in Tabula Mundi, as I maybe have mentioned before, of memory palacing her images and sharing them within the cards that they show back up in. So Mars shows back up in the Nine of Swords, and so we have the boar with the sword going through its head. Now, just to go back to her most recent deck and the Telos 777, this is her Tower. I can't get it to focus. This is her Tower. We still have a bit of a boar image, but it's much more obscured. It's just through this nose that we get that. We get the phallic coming out of the mouth, the tongue, and then we have this, which is very important to a tower. In this image, we have a light tower, which is a cyclops, a monocular tower. The crown is being split off due to the lightning. While this image has a lot of angst in it, I feel like it's incredibly rich for where we want to go today. So, all this being said, as we return back to the Melmaline Telos 777 image of the Nine of Swords, traffic. One day I'm going to have a microphone, one day I'm going to have a computer, one day I'm going to have a lot of different things that are going to make ambient noise less problematic. But right now I kind of like the fact that you know that I'm out here enjoying my day in nature. So we'll deal with the passing trucks. All right. So Melmaline in her Telos 777 card is pulling mostly from Picatrix images. And when you go back and you pull different translations from Gemini 2 for this image, you'll get a repeating image of a man. Sometimes the man has the head of a bird, but the man is often wearing a lead or iron helmet, and then sometimes the man has a lead pipe and sometimes the man is digging a hole. But there's a lot of slight variations. And when I went to consult my Danatrell and David Porica translation from the Latin, I found something opened up that I don't think existed in any of the others. So I just wanted to read it. In the second face of Gemini ascends a man whose face is similar to an eagle, and his head is covered by a linen cloth. He's covered and equipped with lead chainmail, and on his head is an iron helmet, above which is a silken crown with a bow and arrows in his hand. This is the face of oppression, evils, and subtleties. This is its form. Subtleties. Now, so many things actually show up in that image that don't show up elsewhere, that don't end up in Mel Maline's image that I just showed you. I'll bring it back. Instead of this being a buzzard, we have a different predatory bird, one more associated with majesty and height of intellect, the eagle. The eagle-headed man. Now, let's build the image bit by bit. The eagle-headed man, his face, his entire head is covered with a linen cloth. The linen cloth. Now, what is it about linen? Linen is a strong but porous material. So you can see, the eagle eye can see through linen, but it is gauzed to an extent. But it's still a strong fabric. It's one of the more strong fabrics that you can have. Chainmail of lead. Lead chainmail. And lead is a toxic, heavy metal. That's covering his body as a protectant, while maybe at the same time leaching into his body and poisoning his bloodstream, perhaps. But anyway, it's a leaden chainmail. The crown, or the helmet, is iron. Now that's pure Mars right there. Iron helmet. Iron is a metal associated to Mars frequently. The iron helmet. Then he's holding bow and arrows. So this is not a particularly sword warrior. The weapon of choice is one of precision and selection. Also, the bow and arrow is an interesting weapon. I maybe have discussed this elsewhere, but it's an interesting weapon in that it is a participatory act between you and the wind, if you like. But it is, there's an aphorism in Al-Arabi poem that is paraphrased to, when you threw, which is through the arrow, when you threw, I've modified this to lyrics, when you threw, not only you, who threw through you? Who threw through you, too? So the divine throws with the warrior when the arrow is thrown. Okay, so the eagle has a bow and arrow as the weapon of choice, and my favorite, aside from a card of subtleties is very evocative, my favorite here is the silken crown. Silken crown. This is another porous fabric, but one that is incredibly delicate. Incredibly delicate, and almost could collapse with very little assistance. And it's also considered royal. So, a lot of what this image begins to ask is, what image, so I said, but this image asks, but we're talking about the split image, say, for Gemini. And I think what this Decan is wanting to ask us, this image is wanting to ask us, is who wears the crown? And who selects who wears the crown? How is the crown selected? How is the image selected as the ruler? And is your crown a monarchic crown? Or is it a different form of rulership? I'll keep going with that in a little bit. So, let's now move to the Tree of Life and the architecture of the mirror. What I'm calling the architecture of the mirror here. Why am I calling it that? Well, we have moved from Netzach on the right-hand path to Hod on the left-hand path, which it was in our last Decan, Gemini 1, which is often associated with intellect, but to us it was routing. It is signal processing. It is the mental, the sword that bundles everything together in one Ethernet cable and shoots it down toward our current Sephira, which is Yesod. Yesod is in the Tree of Life. I need to get a good image to show, but the Tree of Life has 3 pillars. You have the left-hand path, you have the right-hand path, and you have the middle pillar. And the path traced by the Golden Dawn is a zigzagging shape, which similarly to, or is a similar image to the lightning bolt that strikes the tower, interestingly enough. Okay, Yesod. So the planet or body that Yesod is resonant with is the moon. So the moon, this is a lunar Sephira. This is a reflective Sephira. And it is the last stop before we get to Malkuth, which is the physical manifestation into the material plane of this entire trajectory. We move from Keter, which is the crown from source, which is the source of light, say, and we trace light through the tree, and we arrive at the mirror, Yesod, before we can transition into Malkuth, which is me and you, physical. If we could touch each other right now, it would be our physical manifestation in reality, Malkuth. Okay. So, that is interesting. Why does the intellect need, and it's in the middle of the tree, and so is Malkuth, is the middle of the tree. So we oscillate, or we move back and forth between the Jupiterian energy, and then we move over to, am I doing that right? No, sorry. It's Venusian energy to Jupiterian energy, or to mercurial routing, and then we come to the moon, and the moon is accumulating or concentrated in the center to the 2 points, like this. It's a mirror, in a way, of the upper triad. Keter, Chokmah, Bina. The supernals, it's called. So you have up, you have low. Okay? That's another image. We won't go into that. Getting too diverted here. Why does it route that way? And why do we call this cruelty? Is this a faded station? Does reflection always distort? is the split always cruel? And I think that this is where it is helpful to bring in another one of my very favorite esoteric thinkers, philosophers, early psychologists even, Gurdjieff, G.I. Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff was working in the early 1900s till around 1940. I know I must have mentioned him on this before because he's one of my biggest influences. Gurdjieff, in his Beelzebub's Tales to his Grandson, which is his great cosmic epic that is embedding the story of human evolution and all of these esoteric concepts into a fairy tale, discusses something that happened or was bestowed upon humanity at a certain point in evolution, which is called the organ Kundabuffer. And the way that Gurdjieff talks about the organ Kundabuffer is that it was a deliberate implant that was put at the base of the spine in humans. It's a mirror-like reflective implant placed at the base of the spine. So when I think of base of the spine, I think of coccyx. Imagine an implant there that is mirror-like. So what the organ Kundabuffer did was it turned the natural trajectory of Keter source light cascading down through the human and processing through the human and then grounding into the earth, and then also the source light of the earth. I'm being loose. Gurdjieff was very technical and precise. So right now I'm just kind of like drawing the image, right? The source light from the center of the earth, our crystal core, if you like, from the earth, which is emanating upward through the human. These lights meet in the middle at the eye of the third eye of the tower. This is a holistically functioning human. We're part, or an active part, of the circuitry of the cosmos in this way. The organ was implanted for various reasons, which I won't go into, but it was meant to shorten lifespan, and it was meant to slow this evolutionary movement so that humans would not outpace their development and destroy themselves. I'll put it that way. So it can be said that the angels who implanted this organ had good intentions. They were also trying to remedy their own mistakes in their maintenance of this sector of the cosmos. What is the result? Imagine a prism that is malfunctioning. It doesn't naturally spread the light. It curls the light inward, and it curls the light. So it curls the light coming from above, in and out, up into a loop, and it curls the light coming from below, down and through into a loop like this. So this is the action of seeing an image and mistaking it for real, as opposed to a reflection. That leads to all kinds of mechanical behavior that very often leads to all kinds of suffering. Is this a form of cruelty? Perhaps. mechanical behavior where where one mistakes the image for an external reality of God, or where one is consumed by the image and you become the all-knowing, the all that is, and all is only for you. There are ways that this gets distorted, and Gurdjieff said that it is through this mechanical energy expenditure, which is this implant, the way that it diverts the light causes leakages, energetic leakages, and those energetic leakages are used almost like a sacrifice to the maintenance of the other bodies in the solar system. And he had a very interesting concept for the moon, which is that all of this mechanical suffering that humanity goes through, everything from mental rumination to death in war, all of that energy, to menstruation, all of this energy is released from the human, the collective of humanity, and is given as energetic food for the moon. It is the moon that is benefiting from this energy. Okay, so that and in Gurdjieff's chain, the moon is a lesser evolved body than the Earth, than the sun, than it's in its own process of evolution. So we are feeding downward for the growth of the moon in Gurdjieff's system. So that's really, really interesting, and you can go really far with this thought process. Again, this is a tale. It is a fairy tale. It is not meant to be taken literally. Keep that in mind. But we can anchor some of these thoughts into biology. When we treat our own biology as a mirror of some of these concepts, we can start to investigate the two systems in the brain called the default mode network and the reticular activating system. These are both in the stem, the base of the spine, or base of the brain, and they work like this. Reticular activating system is driven by habit or prior belief, but it is a filtering of all external stimuli, and it only allows, through its gate, it only allows those images or that information that adheres to your internal map of reality. That's very interesting. And once it does that, once it lets that information through, it's very often given over to the default mode network. And the default mode network is fascinating because it is the rumination network. You need no external stimuli in order for this network to run its course. And it is a ruminatory network, meaning that it cycles. So this is when you go into your room at night and you turn off all the lights and you just are alone with your thoughts, the narrative that goes, the cyclical image that returns from childhood, the over and over replaying of your day in a way that doesn't help but just does it again and again. That looks a lot like this. Default mode network also burns sugar. It burns energy. So an overactive default mode network is something that is an energetic leak, in a sense. Are we the victims of these two? Oh wait, one other little thing that I thought was fun. Default mode network, DMN. Demon. This is our little demon. This is our little Maxwell's demon in our brain for the nerds out there. Now, Maxwell's demon is the little entity that's used to talk about the second law of thermodynamics, which is the idea that there's a little guy in a chamber that has really fast-moving particles and really slow-moving particles. There's a little demon there, and he's got the slit, and he opens up the door and lets all the fast particles move through the door and closes it for the slow-moving particles. So he reverses entropy by his little demonic action. Well, DMN, default mode network, that's our little demon in the brain. We let the RAS opens that door to something that is already in our mental map, and then that little demon just goes, nope, you stay here, 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 you stay here. You are this. This is you. This is how ego and identity are often locked, okay? Little demon, DMN, default mode network. So we can look further out to nature if we want to maybe soften the feeling that this is a kind of a helpless little trap or something like that. There's a story that is, I heard it via Dr. Zach Bush, but I can't verify its authenticity, but it will serve as a perfect image here. Dr. Zach Bush talks about a person who was studying the predatory behavior of birds that hunt over lakes. Eagles are one of these predatory birds that he was observing. So we go back to our image. Lake is a giant mirror. Again, we return to our image. I'm not diverting, I'm bringing it all in. So predatory birds, he was watching how they selected and how they hunted over a long period of time. And this observer was noticing that there would be a fish that would break from the school and move to the center of the lake or pond, or move to a central area of the lake and the pond, begin tracking its tail above the water in a circle, in a cyclical fashion, creating almost a whirlpool effect. Eagle, flying above, sees this as the target. Then a really interesting thing starts to happen. This happens so fast that the observer didn't notice this right away. But the eagle folds the wings, takes the dive toward the target of the whirlpool in the center of the mirror, and right before the talons open, the fish jumps out of the water into the talons of the eagle. What is that about? Is the fish a victim of an eagle that is viciously and cruelly selecting its prey, and who will the victim that will no longer have life in that lake? Or is that fish participating in this process? The fish maybe is creating that whirlpool as an attractor. Perhaps what's going on in the little fish brain is that all possibilities have been exhausted in my current plane of existence. All possibilities. I have looped, I have looped, I have looped, I have seen all. There is nowhere for me to grow here. And so he calls in the wings of the eagle and leaps into the air and grows wings of his own. So, let's return to the moon and the food for the moon. I think that Gurdjieff was articulating something very, very real that happens habitually in humans, and that is a feature of brains and is a feature of survival mechanisms. We are pattern recognizing beings that need to consolidate that vast glut of information that exists in our reality in order to survive when it's necessary. There's a reason for this mechanical functioning, swift mechanical functioning, but I would like to try to take that image a little bit further and suggest that there is not only the moon that feeds, there is not only the devouring mother here. There are two choices. I'm not even super comfortable with choices, but this can manifest in different ways based on how we engage it. You have the lunar double, which is the diversion from the organ Kundabuffer. The lunar double creates the loop of the image that crowns itself, and you give away your power to that image, and you crown that image. That image receives the crown. It is a monarchy. You become the sometimes that image gains its own autonomous action out in the world. We'll talk about that later. Then there's the lunar body, which is consciously looking into the mirror. It is the dream incubators that we discussed in our last video. It is the act of self-observation. So, what happens when we look into the mirror and instead of reflect in a reflect a loop, reflect a circle, 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 what if we participate in a spiral? A movement. I don't want to say an evolution, but a movement, spiralic movement of reflection. Image participates, you participate, and in that sort of situation, the circle, the closed loop, turns to a spiral. Now, when we take our eagle and bird, or eagle and fish story, we can see that it's the exact same thing. There is no moralizing of this phenomenon. The loop is the spiral from a different vantage point. The spiral is the loop from a different vantage point. Okay? That's very important here. There is nothing wrong with mechanical functioning of the default mode network and the reticular activating system. There's nothing wrong there. That's not a default, and that's not something that was done to us deliberately as a making us a victim of this. That's not an act of cruelty. The cruelty comes from the way that we engage with it. So that leads me to the star of this show here, Decan II. This is the point at which everything turns. This is Mars. Mars, like most of the planets, but Mars is called the lesser malefic in the Hellenistic world. Saturn is the greater malefic. I feel like we have received and poorly investigated the way the ancients thought about Saturn and Mars in particular. And we have adopted, I would even suggest, a very lazy point of view about what Mars is. You will always hear Mars as the god of war. Mars is the aggressor. Mars is male aggressive action. Okay? This is so missing the point. The Mars that we see in Gemini 2 is a Mars. It's a mercurial Mars. So it is helped by Mercury's energy here. But we return to an even earlier Mars. We return to the god of agriculture. We return to the god who sees, or the being who sees the tree branch that is dead and cuts the tree branch in order that the new branch might grow. A Mars that cuts, that chooses, that aims and edits. So when we're in the Mercury realm, Mars is the satirist. Language, words that can cut. They're not cutting to be cruel, for Oscar Wilde say. They're not cutting to be cruel. They're cutting to open up the wound to see the light. Okay? So Mars here is the observer self. The observer self that chooses what gets the crown, who gets coronated. It is the one who knows the boundary, the one that understands relationships in a visceral and direct way and quickly chooses. Okay, Mars is incredibly important to this. It's the hinge of everything. It is, it turns this entire discussion from who gets the arrow to how do we participate with a process between Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malkuth. Malkuth is associated to the lion. That is the earthly passion. The eagle is the Hod. The arrow of the eagle is found in Yesod. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if I loved that, but here we go. We're going to keep rolling. So, how do we move from monarchical rule, a monarchy where one image rules supreme, monocular vision, to a different form of rulership, a participatory form of rulership? The word I want to use here is synarchy. Synarchy. Synarchy is governance that participates. So what I would like to suggest is that these stations participate with one another to distribute governance. And that is an ongoing process. It is not a fixed process. It is not a process that is immune to falling back asleep and becoming mechanical. It has to be maintained. So, I have turned my my concept of this split, this two moons idea, and I have refined it to say, to suggest that there are many, I'm sure they're infinite, but I have made 5 different lunar processes. And all 5 of these moons exist in our body, they exist in our mind, and they exist outside, and they are moving through the 28 lunar mansions. Okay? And so this is a process that we can actively observe and we can actively participate in through observation. Those moons are Bone, the bone moon, the blood moon, the milk moon, the smoke moon, and the pearl moon. Bone moon is structure. How is structure formed? It is formed passively if we do not observe. It is also formed according to some sort of wild, mysterious logic when we do observe and participate. We see the thing that keeps on returning. We see how the gatekeeper has opened the gate because a structure of belief, a map, exists already in the brain. The bone moon is where we observe how those processes form initially. Blood moon is circulatory. This is the domain of Mars. It is heat. It is moving and exchanging energy. The milk moon is about nourishment. So instead of the devouring mother, which is perhaps overfeeding and then causing dependence, you have the proper nourishment. The colostrum, the mother's milk that has exactly the nutrients needed by the developing infant, produced in it. That's magical mother's milk of nourishment. And in the milk moon, there's also weaning. There is the compassionate removing of the nourishing source so that one can gain autonomous function. The smoke moon is about altered perception. The smoke moon is about how images are not fixed, and sometimes we can engage with the morphing of the perception of those images and help move them from a fixed state. We are the ones fixing them. They are not fixed themselves. They are already amorphous. This is a way of engaging. The pearl moon. Pearl moon is there's no hierarchy here. We're not a monarchy, but the pearl moon is in a way, the culmination of all of this. The pearl is formed by a little piece of sand. It is an irritant. It is the pattern that has run your life over and over again, and you, through observation, code it over time, again and again and again and again, and it accumulates and accumulates. And what surrounds that tiny little irritant that you keep returning to, what surrounds it is the pearl, the pure pearl of moon. That is self-observation. So we see that light in the lunar double, the organ Kundabuffer, reflects. It reflects and it sends it off in another direction. But light through the process of the moons, when we participate in the 28 mansions in the cycle, it is a light that accumulates its energy for your battery so that you might be able to participate consciously. That's the 5 moons. Okay. Lastly, I've got a lot more to go through. The moon process also has gatekeepers. The gatekeepers are the 4 royal stars. The 4 royal stars of Persia, they're called. The Watchers, they're called in other traditions. Those 4 stars are Antares, Fomalhaut, Aldebaran, Regulus, and Teres. Aldebaran is the eye of the bull in the bull constellation. Regulus is the heart of the lion in Leo constellation, in the lion constellation. Antares is the heart of the scorpion. And then Fomalhaut is the mouth of the fish. And the fish is very interesting because the fish is the fish that is at the base of the in the constellation of the water bearer, which is associated to Aquarius. The water bearer is pouring out the water from the vase into the mouth of the fish. I think that Fomalhaut is the pearl of the pearl moon. It is the seer, the watcher that sees. Okay. So these four stars are orienting stars. They're axis stars. You'll see that they're associated with the four directions, the four cardinal directions. However, because of precession, they don't exist exactly in the part of the sky that is in the season that we're in, if that makes sense. If not, I'll have to figure out how to articulate it a little bit better than that. But they have in other traditions been thought of as crowns, as achievements, as trophies. I don't see them as trophies. I see them a little bit more like the bridge keeper. These are the... I kept on thinking of the movie Monty Python, when the King Arthur and the questers reach the bridge keeper. The three questions arise. And the three questions are, what is your name? What is your quest? What is your favorite color? Which is hilarious to me as a child. And you know, like if you haven't seen the movie, then he goes, what is your name? I am Arthur. What is your quest? I seek the Holy Grail. What is your favorite color? Blue. No, green. And he dies. Because the issue is he didn't know himself. So this is what the Watchers do. Aldebaran asks, who are you? They all do all of this, but Aldebaran asks, who are you? Regulus asks, what are you here for? Antares asks, what are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to let go of? And Fomalhaut asks, what are you making? Okay. Now, this will get you the four directions a little bit better. So I bring the Watchers into this decan particularly because due to precession, Aldebaran is not in Taurus any longer. 1 degree of precession every 72 years has caused, over vast amounts of time, has caused the star Aldebaran, the eye of the bull, to be located at almost precisely 10 degrees of Gemini, which is where this decan starts. So, this is our horizon line for the concept of the gatekeeper, or the idea of the gatekeepers that we can pass in our participatory activity of observing and participating with the image. And then just to bring a small personal witness to this, this is also like exactly the degree of my ascendant. So my horizon line, the eastern horizon line and the moment of my birth was at 11 degrees Gemini. So it's in this decan, and it's also almost exactly aligned with the axis of Aldebaran and Antares. So this is another form of reflection. It is when light is under the horizon and when light is above the horizon. And the ruler of my chart, or my oarsman, the one who steers my chart, is Mercury, and Mercury is found in my chart at 0 degrees of Capricorn, exactly conjunct with Neptune, which is interesting for personal reasons in terms of the way that I feel compelled to articulate dreams and articulate the image or the imaginal in my life, but it brings another really interesting thing. In the Hellenistic era, there were what is often thought to be as two kind of competing theories of relationship that can be seen in a chart. And the one that got highly adopted is aspect theory. So Neptune is square, or it wouldn't have been Neptune then, but Mars is square Jupiter, or Mars is conjunct. So we're drawing geometry based on the aspect ratio on a 360-degree circle. That is aspect theory. The other one, which to me is more elegant in many ways, and it's not that one needs to replace the other, but it is more evocative of where we are in this Decan Walk too, and that is the concept of antitia and contra antitia. And what we have there in antitia is the concept of shared light. So we take the 0 degrees points of the cardinal signs. 0 degrees of Aries, 0 degrees of Cancer, 0 degrees of Libra, 0 degrees of Capricorn. And we have then, at those points, we have our summer solstice and our winter equinox. Or our solstices and our equinoxes, because we have 2 of both, right? Right. So Antitia is tracking shared light. So Antitia 0 point is on the solstice axis, meaning that it is at the 0 degrees Capricorn, the 0 degrees Cancer line. Why is that so? Because at 0 degrees of Cancer is when the light of the sun is the longest. Everything leading up to that point, shorter days. Everything leading away from that point, shorter days. This is the longest time the sun is in our sky above the horizon. Capricorn is the inverse of that. It is the longest sun, the longest time the sun is under the horizon, which is also, interestingly, why it is associated to the Jesus myth of the crucifixion and the time spent in the underworld before resurrection. Okay, so shared light, 0 degrees of Capricorn, is the longest time the luminary is, the sun is spent in darkness, in the underworld. Anytime you move 1 degree this way, or 1 degree this way, or come from 1 degree this way, is gaining more light. Hope that makes sense. So, Antitia and contra Antitia, they track planets that share light. So if you have one planet at 2 degrees of Capricorn, you would have one planet at 28 degrees of Sagittarius, and those are planets that are in communication with each other because they share the same amount of light. Okay? When we flip that to the equinoxes, we are looking at planets that, instead of seeing each other, they hear each other, say. So one is equally in the darkness when the other is equally in the light. I maybe went too far down a rabbit hole, but I find it a very beautiful concept, the concept of shared light that can be tracked in the sky and in the moment of a person's birth. Okay. Let's reel this in. We're going to talk about how this the story of the Nine of Swords is all over the place. It goes back to many, many ancient stories, the story of the split, okay? So the first story I would like to reference here is one of my favorite stories of all time. It is the story of the Odyssey. It's Odysseus' journey. And on his journey of return, split, and then the return to wholeness. That is the whole thing with the Odyssey. Every trial that Odysseus has to go through is about reintegration in order to return to wholeness so that he can be with his beloved in their oak tree bed. So, one of the stops on his reintegration journey is an encounter with the Cyclops Polyphemus. Polyphemus is a giant and a Cyclops, so they have only one eye in the center of their head. This is the perfect witness to monocular vision that can ever exist. The monocular vision of a Cyclops has no depth perception. Everything outside of the self is something to be consumed. It eats a bunch of it lives in a cave, and it traps Odysseus's men in the cave by accident, really, but traps Odysseus's men in the cave and then eats some of his men. And Odysseus is tasked with outwitting this giant with monocular vision, Polyphemus. The way he does it is very mercurial. He does it through wordplay. When the giant asks him, when Polyphemus asks him who he is, he says he's no one. He says his name is no one. And then later, ultimately, he escapes by crafting a giant stick, a pointed stick, and shoving it into the eye of the Cyclops. That is the arrow of our eagle-headed man here. That is a Martian act of deflating the monocular vision of the ego by acknowledging I am no one, and using that exact same thing that blinded the Cyclops to open the giant boulder that was blocking his men in, and along on their journey they go. Monocular vision. This is the all-consuming image of the ego that rules. Then we have another deity pair that is associated with Gemini is the myth of Agdistis. I want to say it is Agdistis, which is a hermaphroditic god in Egypt who was incredibly dangerous and powerful because they were two-sexed. They had both male and female genitalia. They were self-generating, and the other gods were afraid of this. So the other gods drove Agdistis to castration, to castrate themselves. And Agdistis did so, and it was out of his discarded organ that a tree grew. Out of their discarded organ, the god's discarded organ, a tree grew, and that tree was an almond or a pine in some stories, almond tree, and that became Attis, and Agdistis transformed into Cybele. Cybele is the mother, the matrix. And then, tragically, Attis and Cybele, as lovers, were driven to play out a dynamic between the devouring mother and the self-sacrifice again, and Attis sacrifices his own masculinity and self-castrates, and to become subservient to the devouring mother. It's one kind of crude read on it, but it is another way that we allow the split to dominate instead of us participating in the split. That's a cruel story. That's a really cruel story. From wholeness to the split to the torture of one image dominating the other. That's a form of torture for sure. And I'd love to bring this to the modern world. So, probably my favorite piece of modern, I'll call it long-form cinema. It was TV, but it is David Lynch, a great hero of mine. You know how I start every video with "Hello"? Yeah, that is a reference to Twin Peaks: The Return, the third season of Twin Peaks. The Return is a modern-day Odyssey. It is a modern-day Odysseus' journey. Agent Dale Cooper is trying to get out of the Red Room, which he's been trapped in for 25 years, since the 90s when the show stopped. He's been trapped in for 25 years in the Red Room, which is the realm of Yasad. It is the realm of the image. Something very interesting happens in this journey. So there is the creation of the Tulpa, and there's the creation of multiple figures that are splits of Agent Cooper into the world. So you have Mr. C, which is the monocular monarchic terror, which exists out in the real world while Cooper is trapped in the Red Room. And Mr. C is a pure shark. Mr. C is a constant, slow forward motion, does not need anything, wants to consume. There's a great point where he's like, one of the guys who's one of his stooges goes, I can get you the information you need. And he goes, I don't need anything. I want it. Okay? So you have Agent C, which is a terrifying example of the tulpa, or the image, the ego image that actually splits off from the self and becomes autonomous in its own right. Then you have Dougie, or Mr. Jackpots, who is the empty vessel. It's the living in the now. There is no mind here. There's only the body. And Dougie wanders around and follows images and repeats what was just said to him in very simple ways. And at one point, Dougie wanders into a casino and sees somebody going cha-ching and on the slot machine, and then winning, and then going hello. And then Dougie sees that there's an image over one of the slot machines and goes over to it and goes hello and wins. And then the entire sequence is about how Dougie turns into Mr. Jackpots and just follows an image, wins, follows an image, wins, right? So this is the complete in the now moment, but no conceptual anchor image. And then you have Cooper, who's still trapped in the Red Room, and the entire series is about how to put Mr. C back into the Red Room, making the ego subservient to the core self, the observer, and re-inhabiting the body of Dougie, who's wandering around haplessly. Anyway, it is a fascinating story, and it's often read as a tragedy due to the final moments, which I won't ruin, because I think that if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. But it's not a tragedy. It's a modernization of the Odysseus journey, because what it what it really amounts to is that the journey to wholeness does not concentrate in one lifetime. The journey to wholeness spans across parallel timelines. It spans across multiple lifetimes. It is vast, and perhaps by design, endless. And there's a terrifying quality to that. However, the journey toward wholeness is a direction that that can't be collapsed to one lifetime. That's the point. Okay. Then we have one of my greatest modern heroes, the artist who recently died, named Genesis P-Orridge. Genesis P-Orridge was one of the founding members of Psychic TV and a bunch of other post-punk bands, or a couple of other post-punk bands that were doing really radical art experiments. And Genesis P-Orridge, late in life, took on an art project, which it's almost inappropriate to call it an art project, but Genesis was a very, very unique human in that they considered their art their process of participating with life, and so it was a matter of life and death every time they engaged in new artwork. And they, with their partner named Lady J, took on a project called Pandrogeny. Pandrogeny project was a simple concept, but it's really radical. It is to find that we are not subservient to the collapse of the identity that our biology gives us. We can participate. Pandrogeny as a project, whether you agree with it or not, is not the point here. The point is what was done. Lady J and Genesis decided that they were going to undertake a series of surgeries that would make them become the other. And through this act, so Lady J became Genesis through surgery, and Genesis became Lady J through surgery, and through this participatory act was birthed a third we. Tragically, for those who were witness to this, in my opinion, very moving act of love and devotion, Lady J died in the middle of the process. Genesis says Lady J chose to drop the body. To drop the body, I think, is a really lovely and moving turn of phrase. Lady J dropped the body, but Genesis did not stop the project. Genesis continued the project and was they from there on out. And they died just a few years ago. But Genesis was a they. So through active participation, they healed, I think successfully healed the trauma of the Attis-Cybele split in modern times. It's a deeply courageous act. I got to meet Genesis a few times, and I will never forget those meetings. An amazing, amazing human being. I'm going to close with one final personal story. This is another split. It's another Gemini twin. This is the story of Waiting for Godot. I'm giving you a lot of favorites here, but Waiting for Godot is absolutely my favorite piece of literature, and it is my favorite play of all time. Beckett is huge for me. In theater school, I had a directing program that had a thesis, which was to mount an entire production. The production I chose to do was Waiting for Godot. And Waiting for Godot, for those unfamiliar, is another Gemini twin split, but it's the split of the forever waiting, the passive split. So the show is divided into two perfect mirror acts. You have Act 1, which goes through the exact same dialogue with slight variations, but it's the exact same trajectory of nothing happening. And then Act 2 is the exact same trajectory of nothing happening again between these two figures, Gogo and Dee. All right, my phone storage is full, but I was in the middle of my very last story, which is the story of Gogo and Dee from Waiting for Godot. Gogo and Dee are the passive split, the split that never makes any movement because they're constantly waiting for the external savior, to put it lightly. In my production, something that's very frowned upon is to do any alterations to Beckett's text. And I decided that I was going to buck this very, very subtly. I put this piece on in a black box theater. And in that theater, the final moment of the entire play, Gogo and Dee. There's the Gogo is the embodiment, the Malkuth, the earthy one. Dee is the mind, the mental, the mercurial one. They're both the tramps. They're lovers. They are the split pair. So the second act ends exactly like the first act ends. They both look down the path, and Vladimir looks to Gogo and says, "Well, shall we go?" And Gogo says to Vladimir, "Yes, let's go." And they both stand there, silently. And that's the end. But in my version, in this black box theater, after a very long wait of silence, Gogo notices a thread in the corner of the theater, up in the catwalk. Walks over to that thread, it's a black thread, and begins to tug at it. Tugs a little more, tugs a little more. The piece of the curtain, as he's tugging, falls to the ground, and it is covered in stars, covered in light. Accidentally, through the act of noticing, Gogo pulls down a corner of the sky, and it falls at his feet. And he takes that corner of the sky, that star blanket, and he drags it over to Dee. It's nighttime, it's gotten cold, and he wraps it around Dee's shoulders. And they stand there, and they stand there. And then Lou Reed's Perfect Day starts to play. And the entire song plays while they stand there. Dee wrapped in a star blanket, Gogo standing next to him. This is the act of noticing. This is not a salvation. It wasn't grace that the star blanket fell. And it wasn't a solution. It wasn't the arrival of Godot. They're still waiting. But Gogo selected an image. And then Dee participated in that image. And that is synarchy. That's the coronation of the double moon. It's not meant to be a final say. It's part of the journey, a journey that spans across infinite parallel timelines. How do we participate? Who gets the crown? What image receives our attention? And how do we pass light through us and carry it and allow it to transform from one form to another? That's the question of Gemini Decan II. Thank you for being with me. Fare thee well. Until next time.